She had everything. $1 billion empire, her name on the front page of every financial magazine, and a husband who had mastered the art of turning everything she loved into a weapon against her. He had nothing except a little girl, a woodworking shop, and a grief he had learned to carry quietly. They never planned on each other. And that's exactly what made it so complicated. If you're watching this story, hit that like button right now, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and stay with me until the very end. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's go. Part 1. The first thing Nathan Brooks noticed about the morning was that it smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. He was standing on his front porch with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching the sky turn from gray to a kind of bruised purple over the tree line. It was just past 6. The neighborhood was still quiet. That particular stillness of a Thursday morning in early October when most people were still sleeping and the world hadn't yet started its noise. He liked this hour. It was the only one that was truly his. In 20 minutes, he would wake Lily. She was 8 years old and hated mornings with a passion that would have been impressive in someone twice her age. Getting her dressed and fed and out the door by 7:30 was a negotiation that required patience, strategy, and at least 2 bribes involving either chocolate milk or the promise of Friday movie night. Nathan had become skilled at it over the past 3 years, skilled at a lot of things he never expected to be skilled at. He wrapped both hands around the cold mug and looked across the street. The Sterling house. It wasn't really a house, it was more like a statement, a 4,000 square foot red brick colonial with manicured hedges and a circular driveway and windows that were always lit up at strange hours, was dark this morning. Every window. Which was unusual. Victoria Sterling was almost always awake before he was. He'd noticed that early on when he first moved to Cedarwood Lane 3 years ago with a grieving 8-month-old daughter and furniture that didn't match and a heart that felt like it had been wrung out and left on a floor somewhere. He'd noticed the lights in her study going on around 5 in the morning, sometimes 4:30. He'd noticed because he wasn't sleeping either in those first months. He'd walk Lily up and down the hall at 2, 3 in the morning, and he'd look out the window and see that single square of warm yellow light across the street and think, someone else is awake. Someone else is up at this hour. It was a strange comfort, the kind you don't tell anyone about. He'd met Victoria properly about a week after he moved in. She'd come across the street with a plate of food, not baked goods, which he would have expected, but an actual meal. Chicken with roasted vegetables and rice, still warm, covered in foil. She'd stood on his porch in a blazer and slacks at 7:30 in the evening and said, "I heard you just moved in with a baby. I figured you probably haven't cooked in a few days." He hadn't. He'd been living on granola bars and coffee. "You didn't have to do that," he'd said. "I know," she'd said, and handed him the plate and walked back across the street. That was Victoria Sterling, no performance in it, just the thing itself. He'd learned slowly and in pieces who she was. Most people in the neighborhood already knew. The name Sterling had been attached to Sterling Capital Group for the better part of a decade, a private investment firm that had grown from a regional operation into something that managed assets in the billions. Victoria had taken it from her father at 26 and built it into something none of his peers had managed. She was in the news regularly. Financial press mostly, but occasionally the society pages when there were galas or charity events. She was always photographed with her husband, Richard Calloway, tall, polished, the kind of man whose smile looked expensive. Nathan had tried once to look up Richard Calloway, the way you casually look up information when you're curious about a neighbor. He'd stopped after a few minutes. He didn't entirely know why. Over the course of almost 2 years on Cedarwood Lane, he and Victoria had built something that he wouldn't exactly call a friendship, more like a reliable habit of kindness. She brought meals when his schedule got bad. He fixed her garden gate when the hinge broke, and then her kitchen cabinet when the drawer stopped closing right, and then a chair with a cracked leg that she'd paid too much for at an auction and which he restored so well she'd offered him 3 times what the job was worth. He'd refused. They'd argued about it, briefly and without any real heat. He'd won. Lily adored her. That had started about a year in. Lily had spotted Victoria in her driveway one afternoon and simply walked across the street and announced herself, the way children do without any of the social architecture adults layer around introductions. "My name is Lily, and my daddy makes furniture," she'd said. "Do you want to see a bug I found?" Victoria had crouched down in her expensive slacks and looked at the bug. "That's a roly-poly," she'd said. "If you poke it gently, it curls into a ball." "I know," Lily had said, satisfied. "I just wanted to show someone." After that, whenever Victoria was home and Lily spotted her, Lily waved like she was flagging down a ship. And Victoria, and this was the part Nathan found quietly remarkable, always stopped what she was doing and waved back. He didn't know much about her marriage. She didn't talk about Richard, and he didn't ask. That was one of the unspoken agreements they'd built. He didn't bring up Claire, his wife, dead at 29 from a brain aneurysm that no one saw coming 3 weeks after Lily was born, and Victoria didn't bring up Richard. They existed in a careful space of present-tense conversation. The weather, Lily's school projects, the furniture he was restoring, the neighborhood gossip he never paid attention to and which she delivered dryly, like a reporter who found her own beat mildly absurd. But sometimes, not often, but enough, he'd catch something in her face. When she didn't know he was looking. A kind of exhaustion that wasn't physical. The way someone looks when they've been managing something very heavy for a very long time and have gotten good enough at it that people have stopped noticing. He recognized it because he had seen it in his own mirror. He drank the last cold sip of coffee and went inside to wake Lily. The conversation happened on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks later. It was one of those accidental conversations that starts because you're both in the same place at the same time and you're too tired to do the thing where you wave and keep walking. Nathan had just gotten back from picking Lily up from her after-school program and dropping her at his mother's for the night. She was going to her grandmother's every other Wednesday now, a routine they'd settled into that gave Nathan one evening a week to catch up on the kind of work that required silence. He was standing at the end of his driveway unloading the truck when he heard her. Victoria was sitting on her front steps. Not standing, sitting on the brick steps of her own house, still in work clothes, the blazer, the dark slacks, the kind of low heels that suggested a day of meetings, with her elbows on her knees and her face tilted up toward the sky. She looked like someone who had walked out of her own front door and simply run out of reasons to go back inside. "You okay?" he called across. She turned her head and looked at him. The evening light caught her face, and for a second he saw something he couldn't quite name. Not sadness exactly, something older than sadness. "I've had better Wednesdays," she said. He walked across the street without really thinking about it and sat down on the step below hers, which was a strange thing to do, but it felt like the right distance. Not presumptuous, just present. "You want to talk or you want quiet company?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment like she was running a calculation. "Quiet company," she said. "For a minute." So they sat. The street was soft in the early dark. Someone down the block was mowing their lawn, which seemed late in the day for it. A car passed, its headlights sliding across the hedges. After a while, she said, "Do you ever feel like you built the wrong life? Like you made all the choices that seemed right and ended up somewhere you don't recognize?" He thought about it. He was a man who took questions seriously. "Yeah," he said, "but for me it wasn't the choices. The life I was building was the right one. I just lost the other person who was building it with me." Victoria was quiet. "That's different," she said finally. "From what I mean." "I know," he said. "I figured." She looked at him sideways, and something that might have been a small, tired smile crossed her face. "You're not going to ask me what I mean." "You'll tell me if you want to," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't tell him. Not that night. They sat on her steps for another 20 minutes and talked about nothing in particular. Lily's Halloween costume plan, which involved being a dinosaur with a tiara and which Nathan had been informed was non-negotiable. And then he said goodnight and went home. But he thought about what she said. Built the wrong life. The phrasing stayed with him. The invitation happened by accident, the way most things that matter tend to happen. He mentioned the cabin almost offhandedly. He was fixing her porch light. The bulb had gone, and he'd noticed it was out and had just brought a replacement over without being asked, which was the kind of thing he did and which Victoria had long since stopped protesting. And she'd asked if he had any time off coming up. I'm taking Lily up to my family's lake cabin next week, he said. Few days. She's been asking to go for months and I've been putting it off. Victoria was leaning against the porch column watching him work. She had her arms crossed, not defensively, just the way people stand when they're cold and thinking. Where is it? About 2 hours north, little place on Lake Harmon. My dad built it in the 80s, nothing fancy. Canoe, fire pit, a dock that needs a board replaced every other year. It sounds nice, she said, quietly, like she was saying it to herself. He finished with the light and stepped down from the step stool and looked at her. Something about the way she'd said it. You should come, he said. The words came out before he'd fully evaluated them. He heard them in the air and thought briefly about taking them back and then decided not to. It wasn't a loaded invitation. He didn't want it to be that. She was his neighbor. She looked like she needed a few days somewhere that wasn't this. Victoria stared at him. Nathan. I'm serious, he said. There's a second bedroom. Lily would love it. It's just a few days of fishing and bad coffee and sleeping too much. He paused. You look like you need that. She didn't answer right away. She looked out at the street for a long moment. Then she looked back at him. Her expression was complicated in a way he couldn't fully read. Something careful and tired and slightly desperate all at once. I'll think about it, she said. He nodded and collected his tools. He didn't push. That wasn't how he operated. He drove home mostly certain she wouldn't come. She knocked on his door at 7:15 the next morning. He was in the kitchen making Lily's breakfast. Scrambled eggs and the specific orange juice that had to be pulp-free, a distinction Lily felt deeply. And when he opened the door, Victoria was standing on his porch with a single canvas bag over her shoulder and her hair down, which he realized he had never seen before. She was in jeans and a simple dark sweater, and she looked different, younger maybe, or just less armored. If the offer still stands, she said. He looked at her. He looked at the bag. He looked at her face. Give me 10 minutes, he said, and stepped back to let her in. Lily appeared from the hallway in her pajamas, hair approximately vertical. She took one look at Victoria, and her face broke open with uncomplicated delight. Mr. Victoria, she shouted, which was what she called her when she forgot the proper title, and launched herself forward. Victoria caught her without hesitation. She was laughing, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere you don't usually reach. And she was holding Lily with both arms, and for a second Nathan just stood in his own kitchen and watched it, and felt something he didn't have a name for move through his chest. He finished the eggs. He finished packing. He didn't ask questions. They left at 8. The drive north was easy in the way that drives can be easy when nobody is performing. Lily sat in the back seat with her headphones on for the first hour, watching something on Nathan's old tablet, her feet not quite reaching the floor, occasionally announcing facts at high volume. At one point, she informed them that octopuses have 3 hearts, which Victoria confirmed was accurate, which sent Lily into a spiral of octopus facts that lasted until she fell asleep somewhere around the 40-minute mark. After that, the cab of the truck went quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. The other kind. Victoria was looking out the passenger window at the trees going by, the oak and maple starting to turn, orange at the edges, red in patches. The specific beauty of that week or two in October, when everything is changing all at once before it dies. Nathan drove. He didn't need to fill silence. That was something people noticed about him, sometimes uneasily. That he could just be in a space without filling it. Can I ask you something? Victoria said, without turning from the window. Yeah. When you lost your wife, she paused. Do you mind if I ask about that? No, he said. I don't mind. How long did it take before you could... She stopped again, seeming to search for the right word. Function normally, or something close to it? He thought about it honestly. Depends what you mean by normally. He kept his eyes on the road. For taking care of Lily, being present for her. I pulled that together pretty fast. I had to. She needed me. He paused. For feeling like myself again. Like there was some version of the future worth looking at. That took longer. 2 years, maybe. And it wasn't linear. There were good months and then terrible months. Did people tell you to move on? All the time, he said. People mean well. They don't know what else to say. Victoria exhaled slowly. People tell me a lot of things, she said. None of them helpful. He didn't ask what things. He waited. I'm sorry about your wife, she said. I don't think I ever said that directly. I should have. You brought me a hot meal in the first week, he said. That counted for more. She turned and looked at him then. He felt it, but kept his eyes forward. After a moment, she turned back to the window. Nathan, she said. Yeah. Thank you for asking me. He nodded once. They didn't say much after that until the trees got dense and the radio signal started to break up, and Lily woke with a gasp, demanding to know if they were there yet. So, Lake Harmon was not impressive in any objective sense. It was a small, quiet lake, about a mile across, ringed by trees on every side, with a gravel road that wound down to the cabin past a wooden sign that said Brooks in letters Nathan's father had carved by hand sometime in the late 80s. The cabin itself was exactly what he'd described. Modest, wood-sided, the kind of structure that had been repaired and improved incrementally over decades, so that it was solid but not coherent, with a porch that wrapped around two sides and a dock that jutted out into the water at a slight angle. Inside, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with water pressure that was technically adequate, a kitchen with an old gas stove, and a main room with a stone fireplace and a couch that Nathan's father had reupholstered twice, and which was now so deeply comfortable it was basically a trap. Victoria stood in the main room with her bag in her hand and looked around at all of it. This is wonderful, she said. She said it the way you say something when you actually mean it, not when you're being polite. He showed her the second bedroom, neat, simple, a quilt on the bed that his mother had made in the early 90s, and she set her bag on the chair and walked to the window and looked out at the lake, and stood there for a minute without saying anything. He left her to it. He took Lily down to check the dock. That first afternoon was easy in a way he hadn't anticipated. Lily had the confidence of a child on familiar territory, showing Victoria around the property with the authority of a small tour guide. This is where Daddy caught a really big fish, but then dropped it, she announced, pointing at a specific section of the dock. And this is where I found a frog last time. His name is Gerald, but he's probably not here anymore. She paused thoughtfully. I hope he's okay. Frogs are very resourceful, Victoria said seriously. That means they're good at stuff, Lily told her, as if she might not know. Exactly right, Victoria said, and she was not condescending about it. She was just agreeing, and Lily accepted this as confirmation that Victoria was a reasonable person. They fished off the dock in the late afternoon, all 3 of them, with varying degrees of success. Nathan caught 2 small bass that he threw back. Lily caught nothing, but remained optimistic throughout. Victoria, who admitted she had never held a fishing rod before, caught a small bluegill on her 3rd cast, which made Lily scream with delight and made Victoria genuinely startled, and then, when she looked at the small fish on the line and back at Lily's face, genuinely delighted herself. Put it back, Lily said authoritatively. They live here. Okay, Victoria said, and carefully followed Nathan's instructions for how to remove the hook, and held the fish at the side of the dock and opened her hand and watched it dart away into the dark water. She sat back on her heels and stared at where it had gone. I have not done anything that simple in a very long time, she said, almost to herself. Nathan heard it. He didn't comment on it. The evenings were where you could feel the place do what it was supposed to do. The first night, Nathan made a fire in the pit outside while Victoria helped Lily with the elaborate process of roasting marshmallows, which Lily approached as a technical endeavor requiring specific rotation and proximity management. She burned the first 3 immediately and declared them destroyed but salvageable, eating each with the stoic pragmatism of someone who refuses to waste food. Victoria, for her part, achieved a slow golden toast on her first try, which Lily found both impressive and deeply unfair. How did you do that? Lily demanded. Patience, Victoria said. Daddy always burns his too, Lily said, looking at Nathan with mild accusation. I like them burned, Nathan said. You just say that. He grinned. She wasn't wrong. Later, when Lily was asleep, she'd gone down fast, exhausted in the clean way outdoor air exhausts children. Nathan and Victoria sat on the porch with mugs of tea. The fire burned down to coals, the lake making its small sounds in the dark. The stars here were different than in the city, more of them, and closer feeling somehow, though he knew that wasn't how stars worked. "What do you do?" Victoria said. "When you can't sleep?" "I walk," he said. "Sometimes I work in the shop. Mostly, I just wait it out." "Does that get easier?" He considered that honestly. The not sleeping? No. But what I'm not sleeping about changes. In the beginning, it was just grief, raw grief. Then it was practical worry about money, about Lily, about whether I was doing it right. Now it's mostly just the ambient uncertainty of trying to build something that lasts. He paused. "That doesn't sound better." "It sounds more manageable," she said. "Yeah, more manageable." She had her feet tucked under her on the porch chair and her hands wrapped around the mug, and she was looking out at the black water. He noticed that she had been progressively unclenching since they arrived. Something in her shoulders, her jaw, the way she held her hands, like she'd been braced for something that hadn't arrived. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yeah." "I've been to 4 different countries in the past 6 weeks," she said. "Tokyo, London, Dubai, Sao Paulo. I have a driver in 3 cities. My company is managing a portfolio that I couldn't explain to you in less than 2 hours." She paused. "And I have not felt—" She stopped. "I haven't felt what I felt this afternoon on that dock in longer than I can remember." He didn't answer right away. He let the words sit. "What did you feel?" he asked. She looked at him. "Here," she said. "Just here. Not 12 places at once." He nodded slowly. "That's worth something," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what's complicated about it." He didn't ask her to explain. He wasn't sure he needed to. They sat until the chill got real and went inside without making any plans for the next day. They didn't need to. The lake would take care of it. The second day was slower and better. It rained in the morning, a steady, determined rain that pinned them inside. And Nathan made pancakes while Lily set the table with the mismatched plates that had been in the cabin since he was a child, and Victoria made coffee, and at some point the 3 of them ended up playing cards at the kitchen table for almost 2 hours, with a worn deck he found in the junk drawer. They played Go Fish, and then a simplified poker that Lily invented on the spot with rules that changed whenever it benefited her, and which somehow she still managed to lose. "You cheated," Lily informed Victoria at one point. "I did not cheat," Victoria said. "You looked at my cards." "I looked at my own cards." "Your eyes went—" Lily made a complicated gesture with her fingers to indicate suspicious eye movement. Victoria pressed her lips together very hard. Nathan could see her struggling not to laugh. "I think," Nathan said carefully, "that Lily makes up the rules so she can always accuse someone of cheating when she's losing." Lily turned to him with an expression of devastating betrayal. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I'm on the side of truth," Nathan said, which was a mistake. What followed was a solid 4 minutes of Lily making her case for why truth was overrated in card games, and Victoria laughing so hard she had to set her cards down, and Nathan watching both of them and feeling something warm and uncomplicated settle somewhere in the neighborhood of his chest. He had not had a day like this in 3 years. He was careful not to think too much about that. The rain cleared by afternoon, and the light that came after was the specific gold of late October, low and long and making everything look more itself than usual. Victoria found him in the small outdoor storage shed that doubled as a workshop, where he was looking at a rocking chair that had been sitting in the corner of the cabin for probably 15 years with a cracked rear leg. He'd been thinking about it since they arrived. "What's wrong with it?" she asked from the doorway. "Rear leg's cracked, probably from being in here through too many winters. The wood expanded and contracted too many times." He ran his thumb along the crack. "It's fixable. Just takes time." She came in and crouched down and looked at it. She was close enough that he was aware of her proximity in the way you become aware of things when you're not looking directly at them. "You can tell a lot about someone," she said, "from what they think is worth fixing." He looked at her. She was still looking at the chair. "Is that a comment on me?" he asked. "It's an observation," she said. "You could throw this out. Buy a new one." "It's a good chair," he said. "It just needs time." She looked up at him then. They were closer than he'd registered, in the way that happens in small spaces. He held the look for a moment and then stood up and went to get a clamp from the shelf. "I'll start on it tonight," he said, "after Lily's in bed." She nodded and straightened and went back outside. He stood there for a second with the clamp in his hand. He did not think about her. He went to get the wood glue. The third day she talked. Not all at once. Not in a prepared way. It came in pieces, the way things come when you've been keeping them tightly sealed for a long time and the seal finally starts to go. It started in the morning when Lily was down at the dock by herself, visible from the porch, within shouting distance, throwing pebbles into the water with intense concentration. Victoria was on the porch with her second cup of coffee, and Nathan was repairing the board on the dock steps that had been soft for 2 years, and she said, without preamble, "Richard controls most of my public calendar." He kept working. "What do you mean, controls it?" "He inserts himself," she said. "Events, appearances, board meetings, things I didn't invite him to. He shows up and it looks like we're together, as a couple, as a unit. And because it looks that way, people assume." She took a sip of coffee, "And I've let it happen for long enough that correcting it now looks like I'm the one who changed." He set down the drill and looked at her. "How long has it been like this?" "A long time," she said. "Since the beginning, really. I just didn't see it. Or I saw it and I called it something else." "What did you call it?" She looked at her coffee. "Love," she said, flatly, like the word had lost its meaning through misuse. He picked up the drill again, not because he didn't care, but because he'd found, in his experience, that people sometimes talked more easily when you gave them the impression that the world was still going about its business. "Has he hurt you?" he asked. A pause. "Not the way you mean," she said. "Nothing you could show a judge." Another pause. "Just constant management of what I say and who I'm near and what I'm seen doing. My instincts versus his version of reality. After long enough, you start to wonder which one of you is wrong." "You're not wrong," he said. "You don't know that." "I've known you almost 2 years," he said. "You're one of the most direct, clear-headed people I've met. If you think something's wrong, something's wrong." She was quiet for a long time. Down at the dock, Lily had moved on from pebbles to attempting to catch something in the shallow water with her hands, which was going to be unsuccessful but would occupy her for a good 20 minutes. "Nathan," Victoria said. "Yeah. I filed for divorce 3 weeks ago." He stopped working. He set the drill down on the step and turned and looked at her fully. She was looking at him steadily. Her face was calm in the way that faces are calm after a decision has been made, and the terror of making it has passed, leaving only the thing itself. "Does he know?" Nathan asked. "My lawyer filed the paperwork," she said. "He's been served. He just hasn't acknowledged it. He's doing the thing he does where he pretends it isn't happening." "Is he dangerous?" She thought about that for a moment too long. "He's careful," she said finally. "Richard is always careful. He knows exactly how far to go." Nathan looked at her. He thought about the lights across the street at 4:30 in the morning. He thought about the way she'd looked sitting on her own front steps, out of reasons to go back inside. "Why did you come here?" he asked. "I mean, why yes? You could have gone anywhere." She looked at him. Something passed across her face, something careful and complicated, and maybe a little raw. "Because you were the first person who asked," she said quietly, who didn't want anything from the answer. He sat with that for a moment. Then he picked up the drill. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" "Okay," he said. "We'll figure out the rest as it comes." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was just a man telling a woman that she was not, at this particular moment, alone in dealing with her situation. She turned back to her coffee. Lily, down at the dock, had apparently decided to take off her shoes, which was going to lead to something involving wet socks and a negotiation Nathan was not looking forward to. "She's going to get her feet wet," Victoria said. "Yeah," Nathan said. "Are you going to say something?" "Not yet," he said. "She looks happy." Victoria watched Lily splashing in the shallows. After a moment she laughed. Soft, real, just for herself. "Yeah," she said. "She does." He worked on the step. The lake was still and cold and very blue under the October sky. Somewhere in the trees, a woodpecker was working on something. The world was very quiet, and Lily was very happy, and he did not think about what came next. Not yet. He fixed the step. He would fix the chair tonight, one thing at a time. He fixed the rocking chair that night. It took him longer than he expected. The crack had run deeper than it looked from the surface, the way damage usually does, and he had to work carefully with the clamp and the glue to make sure the joint would hold without splitting somewhere else under pressure. He worked by the light of the single overhead bulb in the shed, the lake making its small sounds outside, the cabin quiet behind him. Lily had been asleep since 8:30. Victoria had said goodnight around 9:30 politely, giving him space the way she always seemed to know when to give space. He thought about what she'd told him that morning, not obsessively, not the way you turn something over and over looking for meaning that isn't there, just the honest weight of it. 3 weeks ago, she'd done something that took most people years of convincing themselves to do, and she'd done it quietly, without announcement, without a support structure in place. She'd filed papers and then shown up on a lake cabin porch the next morning with a single bag and a face that was trying very hard not to show how scared she was. He understood that kind of bravery, the kind that doesn't look like bravery from the outside because it's mostly just someone doing the next necessary thing when they're out of alternatives. He tightened the clamp a final turn and stepped back and looked at the chair. It would need to set overnight. In the morning, he'd sand the joint smooth and it would hold for another 20 years if someone treated it reasonably. He turned off the light and went inside. The cabin was dark except for the small lamp in the main room that he left on as a habit. Lily sometimes woke at night disoriented in unfamiliar places and needed to see light under the bedroom door. He was almost past the hallway when he noticed the door to Victoria's room was open a few inches, and the room beyond it was dark, but she wasn't in it. He found her on the dock. She was sitting at the end of it with her knees pulled up and her arms wrapped around them, looking out at the water. The moon was up, and it threw a pale line across the lake that ended somewhere around her feet. She had a sweater on over what she'd worn to bed, and she hadn't heard him come out, or if she had, she didn't turn around. He walked down the dock, careful of the soft board he'd fixed that afternoon, which was solid now, but which he instinctively avoided anyway, and sat down beside her. Not too close, just there. "Couldn't sleep," she said. Not a question. "I was in the shed," he said. "Finished the chair." She nodded. They were quiet for a moment. An owl called somewhere in the trees across the water and then went silent. "I keep running through the paperwork in my head," she said. "The filing, what comes next, the things his lawyers are going to do." She exhaled. "I know the law. I've been through enough contracts to know that what's in writing matters and what he feels about it matters considerably less. But at 2 in the morning, the legal framework stops being comforting." "What does he feel about it?" Nathan asked. "That I belong to him," she said, simply and without drama, the way you say something you've known for a long time. Not in a sentimental way, in a property way. "He built his public identity around being married to me and being adjacent to what I've built. And losing that." She paused. "Richard doesn't lose things. He redirects them. He finds another angle." "What angle does he have here?" She was quiet for a moment. The water moved slowly below them, the dock shifting almost imperceptibly. "My past," she said. "There are things. Decisions I made when I was younger, mistakes I'm not proud of. Nothing illegal, nothing that would matter to any reasonable person. But Richard knows how to make things matter to unreasonable people." She looked at the moon on the water. "He threatened me once, about 6 months ago. Not overtly. He'd never do it overtly. He just mentioned certain things, in passing. The way you mention a knife you happen to be holding." Nathan was quiet. He was listening the way he listened when things were important, with his whole attention and without interrupting. "I should have filed then," she said. "I waited 3 more months. I don't know what I was waiting for." "You were waiting until you were sure," he said. "I was waiting until I was scared enough," she said. "That's not the same thing." He considered that. "Sometimes it is," he said. She looked at him sideways. "You're annoyingly good at not giving people false comfort." "Lily tells me the same thing," he said. She asked me once if Santa Claus was real, and I said I'd get back to her on that. Victoria made a sound that was almost a laugh. What did you tell her? I told her that the idea of Santa Claus was real, that a person who wants to give things to people who need them without getting credit for it is a real kind of person. He paused. She thought about it for a day and said that was a weird answer, but she accepted it. That's a very Nathan answer, Victoria said. Yeah, he said. I know. She dropped her chin onto her knees and looked back at the water. The owl called again, closer this time. Can I ask you something personal? She said. You usually just ask, he said. You don't usually ask if you can ask. She smiled at that briefly. Do you ever wonder if you're too alone? Like, you chose this, the quiet, the routine, the way you don't really let people… She stopped. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm asking if you wonder. He thought about it honestly, the way he tried to think about things honestly. Yeah, he said, sometimes. Usually late at night. He looked at the water. When Claire died, I decided a lot of things about how I was going to live. Some of them were decisions, and some of them were just shutting doors without noticing I was shutting them. He paused. I've opened a few back up since. It's slow. Which ones? Letting my mom actually help instead of just saying she should. Letting Lily have the big feelings instead of trying to manage them for her. He was quiet a moment. Letting people sit on my dock at midnight without asking them to explain it. Victoria didn't say anything, but something in her shoulders changed. Get some sleep, he said, not unkindly. It'll all still be complicated in the morning. That's not comforting either, she said. Wasn't trying to be, he said. He stood up and she looked up at him from where she was sitting, the moonlight catching her face at an angle, and for a moment he was aware of something he'd been carefully not being aware of for a while now. He didn't do anything about it. He extended his hand and she took it, and he helped her to her feet and they walked back up the dock together and went inside. He lay in bed for a while not sleeping. This was not new, but what he was thinking about was. He told himself it was nothing. Then he told himself not to be an idiot. Then he stopped thinking about it and eventually fell asleep. The morning was better. Mornings usually were. Lily was up before both of them, which was unusual and alarming, and Nathan found her in the kitchen attempting to make her own breakfast with an energy and determination that had resulted in a reasonable amount of cereal being in her bowl and an unreasonable amount of it being on the counter. She looked up when he came in with the focused expression of someone who had been hoping not to be caught. I was going to clean it up, she said. I know, he said. I wanted to surprise you. You did, he said. He cleaned up the counter and made coffee, and did not comment on the cereal situation further because Lily had the kind of pride that needed to be treated carefully, and he'd learned that early. She ate her cereal at the table and told him about a dream she'd had involving Gerald the frog, who had in the dream transformed into a very large frog with a crown, which she felt was appropriate given the name. Do you think Gerald is actually out there? She asked. I think frogs live a few years, Nathan said carefully, and it's been a while since last summer. Lily processed this. So Gerald might have moved on, she said. Gerald lived a full frog life, Nathan said. She considered this. Okay, she said, and went back to her cereal with the philosophical resilience that children have and that adults spend years trying to recover. Victoria appeared around 8, her hair damp from the shower, in jeans and a gray pullover. She looked like she'd slept some. Not a lot, but some. She accepted the mug he held out without being asked, and sat at the kitchen table, and Lily immediately began telling her about Gerald's memorial situation, to which Victoria listened with complete seriousness. I think Gerald knew he was loved, Victoria said. Lily pointed at her. That's the right thing to say. Thank you, Victoria said. Nathan set down a plate of toast and eggs, and the three of them ate breakfast in the October morning with the lake outside the window going silver in the thin sunlight and the cabin warm around them. It was an ordinary morning. It was also, Nathan thought, the first ordinary morning he'd had with another adult in this space that hadn't felt like a performance of normalcy. It just was normal, which was strange, and also not strange at all. They spent most of that third day in the way the third day at a lake cabin is meant to be spent, without agenda and with minor accomplishment. Nathan finally replaced the soft dockboard properly with a plank he found in the shed. Lily organized a collection of interesting rocks she'd been building since day one and insisted on naming each of them, a process that took the better part of an hour. Victoria read on the porch for most of the afternoon, an actual book she'd found on the shelf inside. Some thriller from the mid-90s that she reported was terrible and which she could not stop reading. "Is it actually bad or is it good bad?" Nathan asked at one point. "The detective has solved 3 murders and also found time to have 2 love affairs and build a boat," she said without looking up. "In a week. In Idaho. Sounds efficient. He never sleeps and never eats, and everyone he meets immediately trusts him completely," she said. "It's aspirational fiction." Nathan laughed. It came out easily, which was something he noticed. Around 4 o'clock, while Lily was inside resting, she'd been convinced to lie down for 30 minutes with a combination of negotiation and the promise of a campfire that night. Victoria put the book down and looked at the lake for a while, and then looked at Nathan, who was sitting in one of the Adirondack chairs with his own coffee and a knot of worry about a client order that he'd been trying not to think about all week and mostly failing. "I want to tell you something," she said. He looked up. "And I don't want you to respond to it right away," she said. "I just need to say it and have it be said." "Okay," he said. She took a breath. She was looking at the water, not at him. "I've spent the last 2 years, probably longer, honestly, keeping everyone at a certain distance. Not because I'm cold, because the cost of being known in my life was always so high. Richard used everything I told him. My family is small, and they have their own complications. My business relationships are transactional by nature." She paused. "And then there was you. Across the street. Who fixed things without being asked, and who told Lily the truth about Santa Claus, and who never once treated me like I was a transaction or a symbol or a liability." Her jaw was set. "And I want you to know that matters to me, that it has mattered, for longer than is probably—" She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "I'm not saying this to create a situation. I know the timing is terrible, and I know you have your own life and your own reasons for the way you've arranged it. I just—" She finally looked at him. "I needed you to know." He looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching, which he respected enormously, because he knew what it had cost her to say. He didn't respond right away, the way she'd asked. He sat with it, with all of it. The 2 years of small kindnesses and careful distances. The midnight dock and the honest conversations, and the way she had laughed when Lily caught the bluegill like it was something she'd forgotten she could do. "I hear you," he said finally. She nodded. "Once. And I'm glad you told me," he said. She looked back at the water. Something in her had eased slightly, the particular easing that happens when you've said the true thing out loud and survived it. He didn't push further. There was a lot that could be said, and none of it was ready to be said yet. And he knew that, and she knew that, and they both let it alone. When Lily woke up, they built the campfire. The last evening at the cabin was the best one. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because nothing did. Lily was tired and happy and funny in the way she got when she was running on empty, saying things with complete sincerity that made no logical sense, and then defending them passionately. She claimed at one point that the stars were brighter tonight because the sky is trying harder. Victoria suggested this was because the clouds had cleared. Lily accepted this modification to her theory, but maintained that the sky was also, additionally, trying harder. They sat around the fire until 9, and then Lily fell asleep in her chair, which she would deny in the morning with great conviction, and Nathan carried her inside and got her into bed with the ease of long practice. When he came back out, Victoria was still at the fire, poking at the coals with a stick, the light of it warm on her face. He sat back down. "When we go back," she said, without looking up from the coals, "everything is going to be complicated again." "Yeah," he said. "Richard is going to do what he's going to do. My lawyers are going to be busy. The press will probably get involved at some point." She turned the stick in the coals, and a small shower of sparks went up. "I'm not asking you for anything. I want to be clear about that. What I said this afternoon was just, it needed to be said. I'm not putting it on you." "I know," he said. "I'm capable of managing my own situation." I know that too, he said. Better than most people in your life have given you credit for. She looked up at him across the fire. But, he said carefully, managing something alone when you don't have to isn't strength. It's habit. She looked at him for a long moment. Is that something you know personally? Yeah, he said. It took me 2 years to let my mother help me with Lily. Not because she wasn't offering, because I'd convinced myself that needing help was failure. He shook his head. It's not failure, it's just reality. I'm not good at reality, she said. You're better at it than you think, he said. You made a real decision 3 weeks ago when everything in your life was telling you not to. That's pretty grounded. She put the stick down. The fire was lower now, settling into itself. I'm scared, she said. Just that. No preamble or qualifier. Just the plain fact of it. I know, he said. Not about Richard, she said. About after. About who I am when the thing I've been fighting against isn't there anymore. She looked at her own hands. I've been defined by that marriage, publicly, privately, internally, for so long. If it's gone, I don't entirely know what's left. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Lily asked me something once, after her mother died. She was 4, so her understanding of it was partial, but she asked me, Daddy, if Mommy is gone, does that mean you're not a husband anymore? Victoria looked at him. And I said, I'm still me. I'm just differently shaped now. He looked at the coals. She seemed okay with that. Victoria didn't say anything for a while. The fire crackled once and then went quieter. Differently shaped, she said. It's not a bad thing, he said. Eventually. She nodded slowly. Eventually. They sat until the fire was almost nothing and the cold came in off the water and they finally went inside. He made sure the screens were latched and the embers in the pit were fully out, and she stood at the kitchen sink running water for a glass, and the cabin was warm and quiet and entirely ordinary. He walked past the hallway to his bedroom and stopped. Victoria. She looked up. I'm glad you came, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Just that steady, clear look she had when she meant something. Me too, she said. He went to bed. He slept this time quickly and without interruption, which was unusual enough that he noticed it in the morning, like you notice that a pain you'd gotten used to is temporarily gone. They packed up the next morning with the specific efficiency of people leaving a place they're not ready to leave. Lily was quiet in the way she got when something was ending, putting her rock collection into her backpack with care, saying a specific goodbye to the dock and the shed, and what she designated as Gerald's area of the shoreline. Victoria stripped the bed in her room and folded the quilt, and Nathan found it on the chair when he went to check and didn't say anything about it. They drove home mostly in companionable quiet. Lily fell asleep again within the first hour, which Nathan suspected had become a pattern she'd established simply because she'd discovered that the truck was a good place to sleep. Victoria had her book, The Terrible Idaho Detective, and read for a while and then didn't, just watched the trees thinning as the highway widened into more familiar territory, and the signs for cities started appearing. An hour from home, she said, I need to call my lawyer when we get back. I know, he said, and I should probably call my sister. She doesn't know yet. A pause. She's going to have feelings about it. Good feelings or complicated ones? Both, she said. Charlotte has never liked Richard, but she's also someone who confuses staying in bad situations with loyalty, and she's going to want to have a whole conversation about whether I tried hard enough. Victoria said this without bitterness, just the particular weariness of someone who knows exactly how a conversation is going to go before it happens. She means well. People who mean well are sometimes the hardest, he said. Yes, she said. Exactly. They came off the highway onto the state road and then into the familiar suburb of Cedarwood Lane with its tidy houses and old oaks and the specific feel of a neighborhood that hadn't changed much in 20 years. Nathan pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine, and they all sat for a moment in the silence of having arrived somewhere. Lily woke up. Are we home? She said. Home, Nathan said. Nathan, Lily looked out the window at the house, and then across the street at Victoria's house, and then at Victoria. Are you coming for dinner? She asked. Victoria turned in her seat and looked at Lily with an expression Nathan couldn't quite see from his angle, but which he suspected was warm in a complicated way. "Not tonight, Bug," she said. It was the first time she'd used Lily's nickname, which Nathan used and which Lily permitted from exactly two people. Lily didn't correct her. "I have some phone calls to make." "Okay," Lily said, accepting this immediately, and climbed out of the truck. Victoria got out and got her bag from the back and stood on the curb. Nathan came around the truck and stood in front of her. They looked at each other in the afternoon light of Cedarwood Lane, which was not dramatic lighting but was real, and that was better. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm doing it anyway." He nodded. She shifted her bag on her shoulder and turned across the street. She got almost to the center line and then stopped and turned back, and he was still standing there because he had not yet moved. "Nathan," she said. "Yeah." "I'm going to be fine," she said. "I need you to know I know that. What I said yesterday afternoon, that wasn't a woman falling apart. That was a woman being honest." "I know," he said. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. She crossed the street. He watched her go up her front walk and take out her key and let herself in. The door closed behind her. The house absorbed her back into it, and from the outside it looked the same as it always had. Imposing, well-maintained, giving nothing away. He stood there for a moment on his own driveway. Then Lily appeared in the front doorway and informed him that she was hungry and that she thought they should have soup, and also that she had decided to write a memoir about Gerald and would need his help with spelling. "Okay," he said, and went inside. He made soup. Lily narrated the opening chapters of Gerald's memoir, which covered primarily Gerald's early life as an egg, and which contained more drama than Nathan would have expected. He asked questions when required. He did the dishes. He read to her after dinner and got her to bed by 8:30, and then sat in the quiet of his own house for a while, in the chair in the main room that needed a new cushion, with the lamp on and the street outside the front window dark and still. Across the street, one light was on in Victoria's house, second floor, what he knew to be the study. He looked at it for a while. Then he got up and went to his shop and started work on a dining table he'd been putting off for a client in the next county. He worked for 2 hours and the work was good, and when he finally went to bed, the light in her study was still on. He didn't think about it. He fell asleep. He was good at not thinking about things, mostly. Mostly. The week after they came back from the cabin was quiet in the way that weeks are quiet before something breaks. Nathan went back to his regular schedule, the workshop, the school pickups, the client calls, the particular rhythm of a life that had been deliberately constructed to run smoothly and which he maintained with the quiet diligence of someone who understood that routine was the architecture holding everything else up. He finished the dining table for the client in the next county. He started on a commissioned bookcase for a woman in Milford who had sent him 4 reference photos and a detailed letter about the precise grain pattern she wanted, which he respected because most people didn't think that carefully about what they were asking for. He did not see Victoria. This was not unusual, technically. They had gone weeks without seeing each other before the cabin, when her travel schedule was heavy or when his deadlines stacked up. The distance between their houses was the same 80 feet it had always been. Nothing had changed in any objective sense, except that something had, and he was doing a reasonable job of not examining it too closely. On Thursday, 5 days after they got back, he ran into her at the end of the driveway. She was getting her mail, which was a thing she almost never did herself. There was usually someone from her household staff who handled the practical running of the Sterling house, a fact that had always struck Nathan as quietly strange, living that close to a person who needed an operation to retrieve her own letters. But she was there, in a coat he hadn't seen before, dark green wool, her hair pulled back, looking tired in the functional way of someone who has been working through tired instead of resting it away. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. She had a stack of envelopes in her hand, and she was looking at them with the expression of someone who knows at least one of them is unpleasant and is deciding whether to identify it now or later. "You okay?" She looked up. "My lawyer called yesterday. Richard's attorney is contesting the asset division." She said it evenly, like a weather report. "It's going to be a longer process than I hoped." "How much longer?" Hard to say. She tucked the envelopes under her arm. His strategy is delay. Run up costs, complicate everything, make me tired enough that I settle for less than I'm owed. A pause. It won't work, but it's going to be unpleasant for a while. I'm sorry, Nathan said. Don't be, she said. I knew what I was walking into. She said it with the kind of firmness that is sometimes genuine and sometimes a front, and he'd known her long enough to hear the difference. This one was somewhere in between. How's the table coming? Delivered it Tuesday. Client cried. Victoria raised her eyebrows. At a dining table? It was her grandmother's design. I was working from a photograph. He shrugged. People have feelings about furniture. Something shifted in her face. Yes, she said quietly. They do. They stood in the gap between their driveways for another moment. The oak tree at the edge of his property had lost about a third of its leaves in the last week, and they were on the ground in the particular way that made the whole street look like it was being slowly buried in something beautiful. Victoria looked at the tree and then back at him. The rocking chair, she said. He nodded. It'll hold. She looked at him for a second with that direct look she had, the one that made him feel like she was seeing something he hadn't quite said yet. Then she said, Thank you, Nathan, and went back across the street with her mail. He stood there a moment, then went inside. That night after Lily was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that got cold while he wasn't paying attention, and thought about the fact that he was, without having made any clear decision about it, in some kind of situation. He didn't call it anything more specific than that. He wasn't built for leaping ahead of what was actually in front of him. What was in front of him was a woman who was in the middle of a difficult legal process, and who had told him something true and important at a lake cabin, and who lived across the street, and who was, by any honest measure, not available for whatever it was he was carefully not thinking about. He drank the cold coffee and went to bed. The situation arrived not gradually, but all at once, the way situations involving Richard Calloway apparently tended to. It was a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after they'd come back from the cabin. Nathan was in the workshop with the door open to the cold air, working on the first stages of the Milford bookcase, when Lily came to the door and said, in the voice she used for things that confused her, Daddy, there's a fancy car in front of Victoria's house, and a man went inside and Victoria looked like she didn't want him to. He set down the plane he was holding. What do you mean, looked like she didn't want him to? Her face did the thing, Lily said. Like when I have to eat the vegetables I don't like, but I do it anyway because you're watching. He went to the front of the house and looked out the window. There was a black car. A serious car. The kind that comes with a driver. Parked in front of the Sterling house. As he watched, the front door of the house was closed from the inside. He stood there for a moment. He thought about Victoria's voice when she said Richard is always careful. He knows exactly how far to go. He told himself it wasn't his business. He was her neighbor, not her. He didn't finish that thought. He went back to the workshop and picked up the plane and set it down again, and went to his truck and drove slowly past the Sterling house on the pretense of going to the hardware store, which he did not need to go to. The black car was still there. He went to the hardware store. He bought sandpaper he didn't need. He came back 40 minutes later and the car was gone. He was crossing his driveway when his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. 3 words. Can you come? He was across the street in under a minute. She opened the door before he knocked. She looked composed in the specific way that people look composed when they have put a great deal of effort into it. Her eyes were slightly red, which she would have hated him noticing and which he noticed anyway. Come in, she said, and stepped back. He had been in her house before, occasionally, but it still struck him every time. The scale of it, the way rooms that large managed to be both expensive and hollow, like a hotel lobby designed to impress visitors rather than house a person. She led him to the kitchen, which was the most human room in the house because it was the most used. A kettle was on the stove. There was a wine glass on the counter with about an inch of white wine left in it. He sat at the kitchen island. She stood across from him on the other side and wrapped her hands around a mug of something. He came to talk, she said. He called it talking. Was it talking? Her jaw moved slightly. He had a folder, she said. Printed documents, photographs, some of them old. A narrative he'd assembled about my... She stopped. He had a story about my past that was technically accurate in the way that a lie can be technically accurate. He arranged true facts to say a false thing. She set down the mug. Things from before I met him. A business decision that went badly when I was 24. A relationship that ended badly. A period when I was... She paused again, and this one was longer, and he waited. When I was 22, I went through a year that I don't talk about. I wasn't well. I made decisions I wouldn't make now. I wasn't dangerous. It was depression mostly, and anxiety so bad I could barely leave my apartment some weeks. I got through it. I got help. I built something after it. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't entirely. Richard knows about that year. I told him years ago, before I understood what he would do with the things I told him. Nathan was quiet. He held her gaze. He's going to use it? He asked. He said... She stopped. She pressed one hand flat on the counter. He said that in the context of the divorce proceedings, and in the context of how the press might receive information about the mental and emotional stability of the CEO of Sterling Capital, it would be worth my while to reconsider the asset division. She looked at Nathan directly. He said it very calmly. He was very polite about it. That's a threat, Nathan said. He would call it perspective, she said. It's a threat. Yes, she said. It is. He sat with that. He thought about what kind of man arrives at his wife's house with a folder of assembled facts and delivers them calmly and calls it perspective. He thought about the photograph he'd seen once on a society page. Richard Calloway, with his expensive smile and his hand on Victoria's back in that specific way that is not affectionate but possessive, the kind of touch that says, I put you here. What do you want to do? Nathan asked. What I want to do, Victoria said, and what I'm going to do are the same thing. She straightened slightly. I'm going to call my lawyer in the morning and tell her everything, every word he said and the folder he brought, and then I'm going to let the legal process do what it's supposed to do, and I'm not going to settle and I'm not going to hide. She paused. Depression at 22 is not a liability. I know that intellectually. I know it. But, he said. But he sat in my kitchen, she said, and her voice changed slightly, went quieter. And he looked at me the way he looks at me when he's telling me I'm less than I think I am, and for about 4 minutes I felt 22 again. She stopped. She looked at the counter. I hate that. That's the part I hate the most, that he can still do that. It doesn't mean he's right, Nathan said. I know. It means he's practiced, Nathan said. It means he found the thing that works and he keeps using it. That's not about you. That's about what he needs. She looked at him. Something in her expression shifted, not all the way to relieved, but something adjacent to it, the way a pressure changes. How do you do that? She said. Do what? Say the thing that's actually true instead of the thing that's meant to make someone feel better. They're the same things sometimes, he said. In my experience, rarely, she said. He got up and went around the counter and poured out the last inch of wine and handed her the empty glass and said, Do you want more of that or do you want tea? And she looked at the glass and said, Tea. And he put the kettle back on because it had gone off the boil. They stayed in her kitchen for another hour. He made tea he barely touched and she talked. Not about Richard, not anymore, but about the things you talk about when you've just had a frightening conversation and need to come back to the surface of the world. She talked about her sister Charlotte, who had apparently called that week with complicated feelings about the divorce as predicted. She talked about a deal her firm was managing in the Pacific Northwest that had been giving her trouble. She talked about how she had started waking up at 5 again after almost sleeping normally at the cabin, and how she resented this. He talked too. About Lily's school project, which involved building a model of a colonial-era settlement and which had resulted in Nathan's workbench being overtaken by small carved wooden figures. About the Milford bookcase. About a set of chairs he'd been asked to restore for an estate sale that were early 19th century and in terrible shape, and which he was going to say no to and then probably say yes to because he could not help himself around a piece of furniture that was worth saving. You're going to say yes, Victoria said. I know, he said. You say that like it's a character flaw. It cost me time I don't have, he said. So yeah, it's not a flaw, she said. It's just who you are. She said it simply, without the particular weight people sometimes put on that kind of statement, and he heard it the same way. Just an observation. Just true. It was past 9 when he looked at his phone and registered the time. He had a monitor on. Lily was deeply asleep, as she tended to be by 8 on Saturdays, worn out by the week, but he gathered himself to go. At her front door, he stopped and turned around. Victoria. She was standing in the hallway. She had her arms crossed, not because she was cold, but the way she did when she was holding herself steady. He came here because he thought it would work, Nathan said, because in the past it has worked, and maybe today it worked for 4 minutes, and then it didn't. He looked at her. That's different from before. That's something. She looked at him for a long moment. 4 minutes is better than it used to be, she said. Yeah, he said. He went home. He stood in his kitchen for a minute doing nothing, which was not something he usually did. Then he went and looked in on Lily, who was asleep on her back with her arms flung wide in the trusting way that children sleep when they feel safe, and he stood in her doorway for a moment and then went to bed. In the morning, he texted Victoria 2 words, call her, meaning the lawyer. She texted back 1, already. He put his phone in his pocket and went to make Lily's breakfast. The weeks that followed moved in their own difficult rhythm. Nathan knew this not because Victoria told him everything. She didn't, and he didn't ask her to, but because he could read the state of things from the small visible evidence, the lights in her study running later and later. The occasional car he didn't recognize in her driveway, which he understood to be lawyers or associates. The Wednesday evening he heard her on the phone in her front yard, her voice clipped and controlled in the way it got when she was managing something that was costing her, though he only caught pieces of it before he went back inside because it wasn't his business to catch. She came over for dinner once, on a Tuesday, which was Lily's idea and which Nathan honored. Lily made the seating arrangement herself, placing Victoria next to her with a conviction that suggested she had planned this in advance. They ate spaghetti that was unremarkable and garlic bread that was slightly burned, and Lily narrated the ongoing saga of the colonial settlement project, which had escalated to include a detailed economy and political system that her teacher had said was impressive, and also perhaps slightly over scope for a third-grade assignment. She's building a civilization, Victoria said to Nathan, low enough that Lily, who was currently explaining the settlement's judicial system, didn't hear. Yeah, Nathan said. She gets that from you. He looked at her sideways. I build furniture. You're meticulous, she said. You don't start a thing unless you're going to do it completely. She picked up her fork. She's the same way. He watched Lily, who was now cross-examining herself on a point of colonial legal procedure. Yeah, he said quietly. She is. After dinner, Lily showed Victoria the settlement project in its current state, laid out on the coffee table in the main room, every small carved figure in its designated location, the layout rendered on a piece of poster board in Lily's particular handwriting, which was large and emphatic with occasional letters reversed. Victoria crouched down and examined it with genuine attention, asking questions that Lily answered with increasing animation. Nathan stood in the doorway and drank the last of his coffee and watched them. He thought about what it would look like to have this regularly, not the specific circumstance, not the lawsuit or the complicated history or any of it, just this. The warmth of a house in November with dinner done and a kid explaining her civilization and another adult in the room who was paying real attention. He thought about how he'd been telling himself for 3 years that he wasn't ready. He put his mug in the sink and went to clear the table. The call came on a Friday afternoon at the end of the 3rd week of November. Nathan was in the workshop when his phone rang and he saw her name and felt, before he answered it, the particular quality of stillness that arrives ahead of things that matter. He's coming to the cabin, Victoria said. Her voice was measured, not panicked, but there was something underneath it. He set down what he was holding. How do you know? My lawyer got wind of it through his lawyer. He knows about the trip. He knows I was there with you. A pause. He's put a narrative together, Nathan, about us, about what it means that I went away with you and Lily. Another pause. He's planning to use it, in the proceedings, as evidence of... She stopped. Character, Nathan said. His word is stability, she said. He's suggesting that my judgment is impaired. That I went to an isolated location with a man while still legally married, which is technically true, and which, in the framing his lawyer has apparently constructed, suggests a pattern of, she exhaled. It's dishonest. But it's the kind of dishonest that's hard to counter because the facts themselves are accurate. Nathan thought about that for a moment. About the cabin, the three of them, the dock and the fire and the honest conversations. About the nothing that had happened, and about how the nothing that had happened was entirely invisible to a man with a folder and a hostile lawyer. When is he coming? Nathan asked. I don't know, she said. He's the kind of person who appears when it's most inconvenient. It's a strategy. Okay, Nathan said. Okay. He was thinking. Have you told your lawyer about the full context of the cabin trip? Lily was there. It was a family trip. You were an invited guest of a neighbor. She knows, Victoria said. It's not, on its own it's not damaging, but combined with the rest of what he's building, the instability narrative, it's one more piece. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not calling you because I'm falling apart. I want you to know that. I know, he said. I'm calling you because you're part of it now, whether you wanted to be or not, and you deserve to know. He heard that. I don't mind being part of it, he said. Nathan, I mean that, he said. I mean it as a fact. I know what happened at that cabin, and I know what didn't happen, and I'm not afraid of someone's lawyer's version of it. She was quiet. Are you afraid? He asked. A long pause. I'm tired, she said, which is what he wants. He wants me tired enough to make a mistake. Then don't make one, he said. Give the lawyer everything she needs and don't make decisions when you're running on empty and eat an actual dinner tonight. A silence. Then, that last one is very specific. I know you, he said. You forget to eat when you're stressed. She didn't say anything for a second. I had lunch, she said, slightly defensively. What did you have? Coffee counts. Victoria. I'll eat dinner, she said. Thank you, he said. He could hear her almost smile through the phone. It was a small thing, but it was something. Richard Calloway arrived on a Saturday morning at the end of November, and Nathan was there when he did. This was not planned. Nathan had been on his porch with his early coffee, the same place he'd stood almost 2 months ago noticing that her lights were off, when the black car came down Cedarwood Lane and parked in front of the Sterling house. He recognized it. He recognized the man who got out of it. Richard Calloway was tall. Nathan had known this from photographs, but the photographs didn't convey the deliberateness of him, the way he moved like a man who had decided a long time ago that the world was arranged for his benefit and had been proved right often enough to believe it. He was in a coat that cost more than Nathan's truck payment. His hair was silver at the temples in the specific way that certain men wear silver temples, like a credential. He did not look at Nathan's porch. He went to the Sterling front door and knocked. Nathan did not go inside. He was not entirely sure why. He told himself he was just finishing his coffee. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself a number of things and then sat there and did not move. The door opened. He couldn't hear what was said. Victoria stood in the doorway for a moment and then stepped back, and Richard went in and the door closed. Nathan drank his coffee. He watched the closed door. 11 minutes later. He did not look at his watch, but it was approximately 11 minutes. The door opened again and Richard came out. He came out the way people come out of places when they did not get what they came for and are not accustomed to that outcome. He paused on her front steps and Nathan could see, from across the street, the set of his shoulders, the contained anger of a controlled man. Then Richard Calloway turned and looked across the street and looked directly at Nathan. Nathan looked back at him. He did not look away. He did not stand up or make any move toward him. He just held the gaze over the 80 feet of street between their driveways, with the coffee in his hand and his feet on his own porch, and no particular expression on his face. He was just there, present and unimpressed and very still. Richard's face did something. Nathan couldn't read it from that distance. Then he turned and got back in the black car and it pulled away. Nathan finished his coffee. His phone buzzed. Victoria. He came to make a deal. I said no. He texted back, good. Then, are you okay? A pause that was longer than usual. Then, come over? He crossed the street. She was in the kitchen again, which had become the room where difficult conversations happened. She was standing at the counter, and she looked steadier than he expected, and also like she had been holding herself together with some deliberate effort, and was perhaps done with the effort part. He offered a settlement, she said. A number. A reasonable number, actually. In exchange for a mutual non-disclosure agreement and my agreement to make certain public statements about the nature of the divorce. She stopped. The statements would imply it was mutual, that there were no issues of control or manipulation, that we both simply decided we'd grown apart. And you said no, Nathan said. I said no, she said. What did he say to that? She looked at the counter. He said I was making a decision I would regret. He said... She stopped. He talked about you. Nathan went still. He said that my attachment to you was evidence of my poor judgment, that I had developed an... She stopped again. Her jaw was tight. He used the word fixation. He said that a woman of my position and standing pursuing a... She stopped completely. A what? Nathan said. Say it. She looked at him. A divorced furniture repairman with a child, she said, flat. Those were his words. The room was quiet. Nathan let that sit for a second. He turned it over. He thought about Richard Calloway and his expensive coat choosing those specific words in that specific order to say to a woman he had spent years convincing she was less than she believed. Is that what changed your mind? Nathan asked. About the deal? Victoria frowned. What? When he said that, Nathan said, is that when you said no? She looked at him for a moment. Before that, she said, I'd already said no. Okay, he said. Nathan. She said his name with a weight that made him look at her fully. What he said about you, I need you to know I don't think of you that way, in whatever category he put you in. I know, he said. I'm serious. Victoria. He kept his voice level. I've been fixing furniture in a small shop in the suburbs for 6 years. I know exactly what I am and what I'm not. What that man thinks of it doesn't change what it is. He paused. And for the record, I didn't change what I thought of you when you told me your husband makes 8 figures a year, so... Something moved across her face. Not a smile exactly, something older than a smile. I told him, she said quietly, that the terms were not acceptable, and that if he wanted to continue this process through proper legal channels, he was welcome to do that. And then I opened the door. And he left, Nathan said. He left, she said. Not quickly. He stood there for a moment doing the thing he does where he looks at you until you feel like you should apologize for existing. She met Nathan's eyes. I didn't apologize. Good, he said. It was... She seemed to be finding the word. It was strange, standing there while he did that and just not feeling it, the way I used to. She shook her head slightly. I don't know what changed. You know what changed, he said. She looked at him. He held it. Then she looked at the counter. I need to call my lawyer, she said. Tell her about the offer. Get ahead of whatever he does next. Yeah, he said. He got up from the stool. She walked him to the front door, and he opened it and stood on her doorstep in the November cold. The black car was long gone from the street. The neighborhood was quiet and ordinary, oak leaves on the ground, a neighbor's dog walking itself in someone's front yard, the afternoon light coming in low from the west, the way it does in November when the sun sets too early and leaves the world looking like something unfinished. Nathan, she said. He turned. She was standing in the doorway with her hand on the frame, looking at him with that clear, direct look that he'd known for almost 2 years, and which had always meant she was going to say something true. I'm glad you were on your porch this morning, she said. He looked at her. He thought about the black car, and 11 minutes, and the man who had turned and looked across the street and found him there, sitting still with his coffee, not performing anything, just present. I was just finishing my coffee, he said. I know, she said. That's what I mean. He went home. He had a bookcase to finish and a daughter to pick up from his mother's at 4, and a life that was his own, and which was, in its modest and specific way, exactly what it was supposed to be. He went inside. He worked. Across the street, one light came on in the Sterling house. then another, then a third. He did not look up from his work, but he noticed. The evening Richard left, Nathan sat on Victoria's porch for a long time without going inside. She had asked him to stay. Not in those words, Victoria rarely asked for things in those words, but she'd stepped back from the doorway after Richard's car disappeared down the road and said, "I need 10 minutes. I just need to stand here for 10 minutes." And she hadn't moved toward the door, so he hadn't either. He stayed on the porch step and she stood just behind him, and the neighborhood settled back into its ordinary evening sounds, and neither of them spoke. He thought about the hour that had just passed, the way Richard Calloway had arrived, unhurried, deliberate, the kind of entrance designed to remind everyone that he was not a man who rushed. A silver sedan, expensive but not flashy, the choice of a man who understood that real power didn't announce itself. He'd parked at the curb without calling ahead, which Nathan understood immediately was intentional. Calloway had wanted the surprise. He'd walked up the path like he owned it, which until 3 weeks ago, technically, he partly had. Nathan had been on the porch when the car pulled up. He'd been replacing a rotted board on the bottom step, the second porch repair in as many weeks, the cabin having reminded him of everything in his life that needed maintenance. And he'd watched the man get out of the car and thought, without drama, so this is him. Richard Calloway was 51. He looked 51 in the way that men do when they've spent 51 years believing their own press. Tall, broad through the shoulders, silver at the temples in a way that read as distinguished rather than aged. He was wearing a suit on a Saturday afternoon, which told Nathan everything he needed to know about the man's relationship with performance. He'd looked at Nathan first, not at Victoria, who had appeared in the doorway behind Nathan when she heard the car. He'd looked at Nathan the way men look at something they're assessing. Quick, thorough, dismissive in a practiced way. "You must be the neighbor," Calloway had said. "I must be," Nathan said. He didn't stand up. He kept working on the board. This was deliberate, and Calloway knew it was deliberate, and they both understood exactly what kind of conversation they were about to have. Victoria had come out onto the porch. "Richard," her voice was flat and controlled. "You should have called." "I tried," he said pleasantly. "You didn't answer." "That was intentional." "I know," he said, still pleasant, still looking at Nathan. "I thought we could talk in person, like adults. We have lawyers for that." "Lawyers complicate things," Calloway said. He finally looked at Victoria, and Nathan watched the shift. The way his expression changed when he turned to her, softening in a way that wasn't warmth but was a very good impression of it. "Victoria, come on. 3 days at a lake cabin with your handyman and suddenly you can't have a conversation with your husband?" The word handyman landed exactly the way it was meant to. Nathan set down his hammer. "I think," Nathan said, "you probably mean furniture restorer, or neighbor, or just Nathan. Any of those work?" Calloway looked at him with the particular expression of a man who is deciding whether someone is worth the energy of contempt. He apparently decided not. He looked back at Victoria. "Can we go inside?" "No," Victoria said. A pause. Something flickered behind Calloway's eyes. Not anger, not exactly, more like recalibration. "Fine. Then I'll say what I came to say." He put his hands in his pockets, the posture of a man who wants to look relaxed and succeeds at looking like he's performing relaxation. "You filed without telling me. That's fine. We both knew we weren't in a great place, but there are things that need to be discussed before this goes further, things that affect both of us." "My lawyer—" "Not your lawyer," he said quietly. "You. Because there are conversations that don't belong in a lawyer's office." He paused. "Like the Meridian thing." Victoria went still. Nathan didn't know what the Meridian thing was. He watched her face and saw something move through it. Not fear, exactly, but the tightening you see in people who have just had a wound pressed on. "Don't," she said. "I'm not threatening you," Calloway said, smooth as anything. "I'm just saying that there are dimensions to our situation that a legal process won't handle well. For either of us." He glanced at Nathan. "And I'd think more clearly about this without an audience." "He stays," Victoria said. Calloway looked at Nathan for a long moment. Then he looked back at Victoria, and something in his face shifted, barely visible, like a card turning over. And Nathan understood that this was not the response he had expected. He'd expected her to send Nathan inside. He'd expected the old dynamic, the one where his presence alone was enough to reorganize the room around him. It wasn't working the same way. "Okay," Calloway said quietly, not backing down, just reorganizing. "Then I'll be direct." He took a breath. The Meridian account, the 2019 filing discrepancy, the Hargrove board situation. He was looking at Victoria now with no performance in his face at all. This was the man without the pleasant exterior. "These are things I know about Victoria, things that, in the wrong context, would generate a significant amount of attention." "Those things were resolved," Victoria said. Her voice was even. She was working to keep it even. Nathan could see it from where he was sitting. "Resolved internally," Calloway said. "Not publicly." "They're not illegal." "No," he agreed, "but they're complicated. And complicated things, in the middle of a high-profile divorce, have a way of becoming stories. You know how these things work." He paused. "I'm not the one who wants that. I just need you to think about what you're doing before we burn everything down." The porch was quiet for a moment. Nathan looked at Victoria. She was looking at Richard, and he watched her. Watched the way she absorbed what he'd said, the way her jaw set and her breathing slowed and something behind her eyes clarified rather than collapsed. He had half expected her to flinch. She didn't. She stood there on her own front porch, and she thought, and the thinking was visible on her face in the way that real thinking is, not the performed deliberation of someone working out a move, but the actual silent weight of a person deciding something. "Richard," she said finally. "Yeah. I know what the Meridian situation looks like," she said. "I've known for 6 years. I've also known that if it ever came up in a formal context, the full record of what happened would show exactly what it shows. A board decision made under bad advice that was corrected 18 months later. You were on that board." She paused. "So whatever you're suggesting using as leverage has your fingerprints on it too." Silence. Calloway's jaw moved slightly. Just once. "The Hargrove situation," she continued, "is documented. Every email, every decision. I kept records because I always keep records, and you know that." Her voice was still level. Nathan noticed her right hand was pressing flat against her thigh, not visibly shaking, but pressing, the physical manifestation of staying steady. "And whatever story you're thinking about telling about me, I would think carefully about the story I'd have to tell in response. Not as a threat, as an information-sharing exercise." Calloway looked at her for a long time. "This isn't who you are," he said. Quieter now. "And this?" Nathan noticed this. This was different from everything before it. This wasn't the polished version. There was something almost real underneath it. "Maybe not," Victoria said. "Or maybe it's exactly who I am and you spent 7 years misidentifying me." Another silence. A car passed on the street. A dog barked somewhere and stopped. Calloway turned and looked at Nathan. Really looked at him this time. Not the assessing glance from earlier. He looked at him the way you look at someone when you're trying to understand the specific nature of what you've underestimated. "Who are you?" he said, not hostile, genuinely asking. "Nathan Brooks," Nathan said. "I live across the street." "Are you in love with my wife?" Nathan held the man's gaze. "She's your wife on paper," he said. 3 weeks ago, she made a decision about what she wanted the rest of her life to look like. I think you should respect that." Calloway looked at him for another moment. Then he looked at Victoria. And whatever he saw in her face, the stillness of it, the clarity, seemed to land on him in a way that the whole previous conversation hadn't. Like he had been trying a series of keys on a lock and had just discovered that the lock itself had been changed. He put his hands back in his pockets. "I'll be in touch through my attorney," he said. Victoria nodded once. That's how it should have been from the beginning. He walked back down the path to his car. He didn't look back. Men like Richard Calloway, Nathan had decided, never looked back. Not because they were confident, but because looking back was an admission that something had gotten away from them. He got in the car and pulled away from the curb without any drama and drove to the end of Cedarwood Lane and turned the corner and was gone, which was where they were now. Victoria standing just inside the doorway, Nathan on the step, the neighborhood going about its quiet evening business around them. After the 10 minutes she'd asked for, she let out a long breath. "Come inside," she said. He followed her in. The house always surprised him slightly, the few times he'd been in it. From the outside it was imposing, Georgian colonial, too much for one person, too much for two people, really. But inside it was less coherent than it looked, like someone had furnished it carefully in the abstract and then lived in it carelessly. The main room had good bones and expensive art, and a couch with a throw blanket on it that looked actually used, which somehow made the room human in a way the rest of it wasn't. Victoria went to the kitchen, and he followed. She filled a glass of water from the tap and stood at the counter and drank half of it. Then she set the glass down and looked at the counter. "Meridian," she said. "You don't have to explain it to me," he said. "I know." She picked up the glass again, put it down. "In 2019, my board approved a fund restructuring on advice from an outside consultant. The consultant's projections were flawed. We took losses. I reported them internally and corrected the course, but the correction process had a 6-month gap that looked worse in the paperwork than it was in practice." She looked up at him. "Richard was on the advisory board. He signed off on the original decision." "So he can't use it," Nathan said. "He knows he can't use it," she said. "That was never really about Meridian." She set the glass down. "That was about seeing if I'd crack, if he could still get to me the same way he always has." She looked at the counter. "By making me doubt myself." "Did it work?" She thought about that honestly. "For about 30 seconds, she said. "When he said the word. There was 30 seconds where everything went cold, and I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm misremembering how it happened? That's what he does. He's very good at making you distrust your own memory." "But then?" She looked up. "Then I remembered that I have every document in a cloud server organized by date and subject, and I have been doing that since 2016 because I don't trust anything that only exists in my head." Nathan almost laughed. She caught it and almost smiled. "That's very you," he said. "Yeah," she said. "It saved me today." She moved from behind the counter and went to the main room and sat down on the couch with the used throw blanket and pulled her feet up underneath her. He sat in the chair across from her. The room was lit warmly, and outside the evening was going dark and the house was very quiet. "He looked at you," she said. "He did. At the end, when you said what you said." Nathan looked at his hands. "What did I say?" "You said she made a decision about what she wanted the rest of her life to look like." She was looking at him. "And that he should respect it." "Yeah," he said. "You didn't answer his actual question," she said. He looked up at her. She held his gaze with the directness that was characteristic of her. No games in it, just honest attention. "No," he said. "I didn't." "Why not?" He thought about how to say it accurately. "Because I don't think that conversation was his to have," he said. Whatever I am to you, that's not a piece of information that belongs to him." She was quiet for a moment. "That's a careful answer." "I'm a careful person," he said. "I know," she said. She looked at the dark window. "He's going to escalate. After today, the fact that it didn't work, that I didn't fold, he's going to find another angle." She said it matter-of-factly, without the quality of dread. "Richard is a process. You don't have one confrontation with him and then it's over. He works in iterations." "What does that mean practically?" "It means my lawyers are going to be very busy, and I'm going to need to be very organized, and there are going to be unpleasant months." She said it the way you'd describe bad weather that's already on the forecast. "It also means that people adjacent to me may become, visible in ways that could be uncomfortable." He understood what she was saying. "Lily and I have been on this street for 3 years," he said. "We're quiet people. There's not much to find." "He doesn't need to find anything," she said. "He just needs to be looking. That's usually enough to make people step back." "I'm not stepping back," he said. She looked at him. "That's not—" He paused, choosing words. "I'm not saying that as a declaration of anything. I'm saying it as a statement of fact. You're my neighbor and my friend, and you've been a consistent good presence in my daughter's life, and I'm not going to disappear, Because someone's husband is unhappy. He held her gaze. That's just what's true. Something moved through her face, not relief exactly, something more complicated than relief. Nathan, she said, yeah. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Not careful honest, just honest. He nodded. Do you want more than what we've been? She said. From me. From whatever this is. She didn't look away when she said it, which he knew cost her something. Because I meant what I said at the cabin. That wasn't a moment. That wasn't the relief of being somewhere safe talking. That was, I've known what I felt for a long time, and I'm asking because I don't want to assume and I don't want to misread, and I don't want to do to you what Richard has done to me, which is decide in advance what I think the answer is, and then manage accordingly. He sat with that. He sat with all of it. What she'd said at the cabin, what he'd been not thinking about since, the thing in his chest when she laughed, the midnight dock, the way she'd held Lily after the bluegill, the lights on at 4 a.m. across the street for 2 years. He sat with Claire, too, with the specific shape of loving someone and losing them, and what that did to a person's willingness to be open to it again. He sat with Lily and the fact that Lily was 8 and building her world largely around him and around whatever he modeled for her about how people treated each other. Yes, he said. I do. Simple. Just that. She'd asked for honest and not careful, and so he gave her that. Victoria exhaled slowly. It was not a dramatic exhale. It was the exhale of someone who has been holding something carefully for a long time and has just been told they can set it down. Okay, she said. But, he said. She looked at him. I can't do this right now, he said. Not correctly. You're 3 weeks out of a filing that hasn't resolved. Richard just showed up on your porch. Your life is in the middle of reorganizing itself in a fundamental way. He paused. And I have a daughter who is 8 years old and who already loves you, which means that whatever happens between us has stakes that go beyond just us. She was listening, really listening, the way she always did, without preparing her rebuttal. I don't want to start something real in the middle of a fire, he said. Not because I don't want it, because I want it to have a foundation. I want it to be... He stopped. He tried to find the word. Chosen. Not just what we fell into, because everything else was complicated. She was quiet for a long moment. How long? She said. I don't know, he said honestly. Until the divorce is finalized. Until you've had some time that's just yours, not defined by him or the legal process or what comes next. Until you know who you are on the other side of all this. He paused. Until Lily is used to the way things are changing slowly before they change more. That could be months, she said. Yeah, he said. 6 months, maybe, she said. Maybe, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. The room was quiet and warm, and outside a streetlight had come on and threw its orange light across the front window. You're asking me to wait, she said. I'm asking both of us to wait, he said. That's different. She was still. He could see her thinking. Not the sharp, quick thinking she did in boardrooms, but something slower and more interior. Most people, she said, when they want something, take it. I know, he said. I don't want most of your life, Victoria. I want the part that's actually yours. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something cross her face that he hadn't seen there before. Not the composure, and not the exhaustion, and not the careful warmth she'd learned to ration. Something more open. Something that was slightly afraid and slightly relieved and entirely real. 6 months, she said. Not a question anymore. 6 months, he said. She nodded slowly. Okay. She uncurled her legs from under her and sat up straight, the way she did when she had made a decision and was beginning to organize around it. I'm going to need you to understand something, though. What? I am terrible at being patient, she said. I am genuinely not good at it. I have never in my life willingly waited for something I knew I wanted. I know, he said. This is going to be hard for me. I know that too. She looked at him with something that was almost exasperation and almost fondness, the particular combination that people get when someone knows them well enough to be annoying about it. You're very calm about this. One of us has to be. he said. She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. I can't tell if you're infuriating or the most reasonable person I've ever met. Both things can be true, he said. She looked at him for another moment, and then she did something he didn't expect. She laughed, not politely, genuinely, fully, a laugh that came from somewhere real. And she dropped her head forward with it, and for a second she was just a person laughing in her living room at something that was funny in the way that things can only be funny when you're on the other side of something hard. He watched her laugh and felt something settle in him that had been slightly unsettled for a while. Okay, she said when it passed. She wiped the corner of her eye. 6 months. 6 months, he said. We have rules, she said, slipping back into the mode she was comfortable in, the one where things had parameters. No. Ambiguity. We're not pretending we don't know what this is. We're just not acting on it while my life is a legal proceeding. Agreed. And if it gets untenable, she started. We talk about it, he said. Not around it. Not the way I've been managed before. Directly, he said. That's the only way I know how. She looked at him. Okay, she said, for the third or fourth time, each one landing slightly differently. This one landed like something real. Okay. He left around 9. She walked him to the door, and they stood in the doorway for a moment with the evening air between them, and he looked at her in the porch light, tired and real and something he was going to need the next 6 months to get properly used to wanting. And he nodded, once, and she nodded back, and he walked across the street. Lily was at his mother's for the night. The house was quiet. He made himself dinner that he mostly didn't taste, and cleaned up after himself and went into the shop and tried to work, and didn't accomplish much. Around 11, he turned off the shop light and stood in the driveway in the cool air. Her study light was on. He went inside and went to bed. He did not sleep immediately. He lay in the dark and thought about all of it. The practical shape of the next 6 months. What it would mean to live across the street from her and be her friend, and be patient about the rest of it. He thought about Lily, who had called Victoria by her nickname without being invited to, who had said goodbye to her doc at the cabin in the same breath she'd said goodbye to Victoria's visit. He thought about Claire, the way he always eventually thought about Claire, not with the old tearing grief, but with the kind of love that had settled into something quieter and more permanent. He thought about what it meant that he could think about both these things in the same night, without either of them canceling the other out. He thought that was probably what progress felt like. Not triumphant, just room for more than one true thing at a time. He turned onto his side. Down the street, someone's dog was barking at something. A raccoon, probably. A sound in the dark. Nothing real. It stopped. The neighborhood went quiet again. 6 months was not forever. He knew how to wait. He'd been learning that particular skill for the past 3 years in contexts he hadn't chosen. At least this time the waiting was pointed toward something. He exhaled, closed his eyes. Across the street, the light stayed on until past midnight. He didn't know that because he was watching. He knew it because some part of him, in the in-between state before sleep, was aware of the quality of the dark outside his window and what it meant when it changed. The light went out. He slept. The 6 months did not pass cleanly. Nothing worth waiting for ever does. The first month was the hardest in the way that first months of difficult things tend to be. All sharp edges and no visible progress. The divorce proceedings turned ugly in the way Victoria had predicted, which was not the explosive public ugliness of courtroom drama, but the grinding, paperwork-heavy ugliness of 2 sets of lawyers arguing over the valuation of assets and the terms of a prenuptial agreement that Richard's side suddenly had questions about, despite having drafted half of it. Victoria worked. She worked the way she always had, which was completely and without much visible complaint, but Nathan could see the cost of it in the way she moved through the days. The particular compression around her eyes when she came home late. The way she sometimes sat on her front steps in the evenings doing nothing, which he'd first noticed a year ago and which he now understood differently. They maintained what they'd agreed to, which was friendship, genuine and without performance, and the honest acknowledgement between them that it was something else held in patience. He didn't pretend it was easy. She didn't pretend it was easy either. That was the thing about Victoria. She told him she was bad at patience, and she was telling the truth, and she didn't try to hide that, which he found, in a strange way, easier to be around than if she'd been graceful about it. She said so once, in November, standing in his kitchen while Lily was at school, holding a mug he'd handed her and looking at him with a directness that landed somewhere between frustrating and honest. "I want to be clear," she said, "that I understand what we agreed and I'm not reneging on it. But I also want to be clear that I find this genuinely difficult, and I think you should know that." "I know that," he said. "I'm not complaining," she said. "I'm reporting." "I know the difference," he said. She looked at him. "Good," she said, and drank her coffee. He thought about that conversation a lot in the weeks that followed. The particular grammar of it. Not a request, not a complaint, just a woman being honest about her experience because she'd decided that honesty was what they were doing. He'd spent years around people who managed their feelings like press releases. And here was someone who just said the thing, even when the thing was uncomfortable, even when it would have been easier to say nothing. He did not take it for granted. December brought the deposition. Victoria's lawyers had been preparing for it since October, but knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. She told him about it on the phone the night before. He was in the shop, she was in her study, which had become a reliable setup for their late conversations, and her voice had a quality he recognized from the cabin, the compressed steadiness of someone managing something they didn't want to be managing. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I know every piece of paper in that room better than he does," she said. "I've been ready for 3 months. "That's not what I asked." A pause. "No," she said. "I'm not ready. But I'll be ready tomorrow morning. I do that well. I compartmentalize until the right time, and then I open the compartment." "Is that healthy?" "Probably not," she said, "but it's effective." He was quiet for a moment. In the shop, the smell of sawdust and linseed oil and the specific cold of a December night through the cracked window. "Victoria." "Yeah, you're going to be fine tomorrow," he said. "You don't know that." "No," he said. "But I've watched you handle Richard Calloway on your own front porch when he came specifically to undo you. If you could do that, you can do this." The line was quiet for a moment. "That day?" she said. "On the porch. I was holding it together by about 3 inches. 3 inches is enough," he said. She laughed. Small, quiet, real. "You should put that on a coffee mug." "Lily would like that," he said. She laughed again and then went quiet, and he could hear her exhale on the other end of the line. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to sleep." "Okay," he said. "Nathan." "Yeah." "How many months is it now?" He checked the calendar on the wall above his workbench. 2.5, he said. "Okay," she said. "Good," and hung up. He stood in the shop for a few more minutes with the phone in his hand and then went back to the table he was working on and didn't think about how 3.5 months was a long time and also not very long at all. The deposition went, by Victoria's account, the way she expected. Richard's lawyers pushed on the Meridian situation, and she presented every document she'd ever kept, and they ran into the wall she'd told Nathan about and retreated. She came home from it at 7 in the evening and knocked on his door, and when he opened it, she was still in her work clothes with her briefcase over her shoulder, and she looked like a person who had just run a very long race and was not yet ready to admit how tired they were. "How'd it go?" he said. "I was right about the documents," she said. "I know." "He has no leverage," she said. He never did. He just needed me to believe he did." "I know that too." She stood on his porch in the December cold and looked at him. "Can Lily and I make cookies?" she said. It was so unexpected that it took him a second. "Lily's upstairs doing homework," he said. "I'll wait," Victoria said. He stepped back and let her in. She sat at the kitchen table and took off her blazer and her shoes and looked ordinary and exhausted and real. And when Lily came down 20 minutes later and found her there, she screamed with the particular delight of someone for whom good surprises are still a primary category of experience. They made cookies, a project that took twice as long as it should have because Lily's standards for frosting were architectural. And Nathan cleaned up around them, and the kitchen was warm and flour got on Victoria's silk blouse, and she looked at it and shrugged and kept frosting. It was, he thought later, a good evening, not perfect. Victoria burned one batch because she got absorbed in a dispute with Lily over the precise shade of green required for a Christmas tree cookie. Lily ate so much frosting she felt sick by 8:30 and went to bed mildly dramatic about it. Nathan did dishes in a kitchen that looked like a baking explosion, but good, genuinely good, in the way things are when they're not performing themselves. January was better. Something in the legal situation shifted. Richard's side made an offer that Victoria's lawyers assessed as reasonable, which Victoria assessed as Richard finally accepting that the leverage he thought he had didn't exist. She turned it down. She had her own offer, and she wanted her own terms. They went back and forth through the cold weeks of January, and Nathan watched her from across the street and drove Lily to school and worked and waited. He had his own complications. The business had a slow stretch in January, the way it sometimes did. 2 clients pushed their orders back. A custom piece came back with a complaint he thought was unfair, but which he addressed anyway because that was the kind of craftsman he was, and because fighting with clients about whether a table was level was not how he wanted to spend his energy. He had a week in late January where the money was tight enough that he sat at the kitchen table with a spreadsheet and did arithmetic until late, and felt the familiar weight of being the only person responsible for everything. He didn't tell Victoria about it. That was its own complicated thing, the line between keeping her informed and making her feel like she needed to help, which she would, immediately, in ways that he was not ready to accept from someone he was waiting to start something real with. He managed it himself. He picked up a rush order from a restaurant in the next county that needed 6 chairs refinished by the end of the month. He worked extra hours. He got through January. Lily noticed he was tired. She was perceptive in ways that still caught him off guard. 8-year-olds were not supposed to notice the difference between tired and worried tired, but Lily had been watching him carefully since she was old enough to understand that there were things to watch for. She came down one night when he was at the kitchen table with the spreadsheet and sat across from him without being asked and said, "Are we okay?" He looked up at her. She was in her pajamas, hair loose, looking at him with an expression that was too old for her face. "Yeah," he said. "Work's a little slow. Normal slow, we're fine." "Okay," she said. "Go to bed, Bug." She didn't move immediately. "Is Victoria okay?" she said. He looked at her. "Why do you ask?" "She seems—" Lily thought about it with the seriousness she brought to things that mattered to her. "She seems like she's carrying something heavy. When she smiles, there's still something behind it." He looked at his daughter and thought, not for the first time, that she was going to be a person worth knowing when she grew up. She already was. "She's going through something hard," he said, "but she's strong, and she's going to be okay." Lily considered this. "Are you going to help her?" "I'm trying to," he said, "in the ways I can." Lily nodded like this was the answer she expected. "Good," she said, and went to bed. He sat at the table for a while longer, then he put the spreadsheet away and went to bed himself. February arrived with the news that the divorce settlement had been reached. Victoria called him on a Tuesday morning while he was in the shop. Her voice was different, not emotional, not exactly, but different in the quality of its quietness. Like a sound you've been hearing for a long time has suddenly stopped, and the absence of it takes a moment to understand. "It's done," she said. He set down the tool in his hand. "Finalized?" "Both sides signed last night, filed this morning." A pause. "It's done." He let that sit for a second. "How do you feel?" The question sat between them on the line. He heard her exhale. "I don't know yet," she said. "I feel like the music stopped and I'm waiting to figure out if I'm still standing in the right place." "Are you?" Another pause, longer. "I think so," she said. "I think I'm exactly where I chose to be." A breath. "Nathan?" "Yeah." "It's February," she said. He knew what she was counting. 4 months, he said. "The agreement was 6, she said. "Not accusing, just stating." "Yeah," he said. "So we have 2 more months." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. Could hear her in it. The particular Victoria Sterling quality of sitting with something she'd rather act on. "I know why you said 6 months, she said. "I understand it. I even agreed with it when you said it." A pause. I'm just telling you that knowing the reason something is necessary doesn't make it feel any less long. I know, he said. Okay, she said. I just needed to say that. I know that too, he said. Victoria. Yeah. I'm glad it's done, he said. I mean that. Not for us. For you. Because you've been carrying that for years and now it's over, and you get to be just yourself for a while. The line was quiet. Just myself, she said, like she was trying the phrase on. You're good at it, he said. When no one's managing you. She was quiet for another moment, and when she spoke, her voice had shifted slightly, warmer at the edges. You're very strange, she said. Probably, he said. I mean that as a compliment. I know, he said. Go celebrate. Call Charlotte. Drink something good. She laughed. Charlotte is going to say I told you so for approximately 45 minutes. Let her, he said. She earned it. She hung up, and he stood in the shop with the phone in his hand and the winter light coming through the window at its low February angle, and he felt something he identified, after a moment, as simple happiness. Not complicated. Just glad that someone he cared about had gotten through something hard and was on the other side of it. The 2 remaining months had a different quality. The weight had lifted, and what replaced it was something lighter and also more charged. The particular tension of knowing what's coming and waiting for it properly, instead of waiting because there was no alternative. Victoria had more space in herself now. She laughed more easily. She started running again in the mornings. He'd see her from the window going past in the early light, and come back 40 minutes later with her hair back and her face flushed and something looser in the way she moved. She called her sister more. She started making decisions about the company that she'd been putting off during the proceedings, and he could tell from the way she talked about them that she was making them from a different place than before, her own place. Not one filtered through what Richard would think. She spent more time at his house, with Lily mostly, ostensibly, but also just there. Working at the kitchen table when he was in the shop, picking up Lily from school once a week when his schedule was tight, reading on his porch in the late afternoons when the weather allowed. It should have felt like they were doing the thing they'd agreed not to do early, but it didn't. It felt like what it was. 2 people who had agreed to be honest about what they were, who were being patient about the form of it. Lily was approximately fine with all of this. She was more than fine. Lily had a specific gravity toward Victoria that had been present from the beginning and had only deepened, and she did not perform it. She just included Victoria in her world with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who had decided a person belonged there. She showed her homework. She requested opinions on her drawings, several of which now featured characters she'd named after people at the cabin. She asked Victoria once, while they were sitting on the back porch, what her favorite color was, and then looked at the answer, but navy blue, with an expression of serious consideration, and said, "That's a grown-up answer." "What's a kid answer?" Victoria said. "Green," Lily said, "or orange or purple." "What's your answer?" Lily thought about it. "It changes," she said. "Today it's yellow. Yesterday it was red." "That might be the best answer I've ever heard," Victoria said. Lily looked satisfied. "I know," she said. March came, then most of April. And then one Sunday morning, Nathan woke up early and lay in bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about the calendar. He did the arithmetic, which he'd been doing with decreasing casualness as the number got smaller. He lay there in the early light of a Sunday in late April and thought that they had reached it. 6 months had passed. The thing they had agreed to wait for had arrived, which was strange to realize because arriving didn't feel like anything in particular. He'd half expected some signal, some internal shift like a lock turning over, but mostly it just felt like a Sunday morning with the birds going outside and somewhere down the street, someone starting their car. He made coffee. He stood at the kitchen window and drank it and looked at the street. Victoria's study light was already on. He set down his mug. He went upstairs and knocked on Lily's door, which produced a groan of impressive depth from within. "I'm going across the street," he said through the door. "Get up when you're ready. There's cereal." Another groan, this one slightly more accepting. He went downstairs. He stood in his own hallway for a moment. He was nervous, which was unexpected. He'd been calm through all of it. The waiting, the complications, the long, slow passage of the 6 months. And now he was standing in his hallway on a Sunday morning in April, being nervous about crossing the street, which was something he'd done 100 times. He crossed the street. He knocked on her door. He heard movement inside, the specific sound of someone who was up and working, a chair scraping back, footsteps. And then the door opened and Victoria was there in a sweater and socks with her reading glasses pushed up on her head and a pen in her hand, and she looked at him, and her expression went through three things in rapid succession and settled on something he couldn't entirely name. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Do you want coffee?" she said. "I have coffee," he said. "Okay," she said. She didn't move. "Victoria," he said. "Yeah." "It's been 6 months." She looked at him. The pen was still in her hand, and she seemed to realize this and looked at it like she'd forgotten it existed and set it on the table beside the door. "I know," she said. "I know you know," he said. "I just wanted to say it out loud." She looked at him for a long moment. The morning was quiet around them. A soft Sunday in April quiet. The trees just starting to go green, the air cool and clear. He was aware that he was on her porch, and that he had not said anything that required a response, and that she was simply looking at him with her reading glasses pushed up in her hair and her socks on, and a morning face that had no performance in it at all. "Come in," she said. He came in. They sat in her kitchen, which was the room in her house that was most hers. The main rooms were still formal in a way that spoke of Richard's taste, but the kitchen she'd reordered over the years in small ways so that it felt lived in, with actual coffee mugs instead of matching sets and a magnetic knife strip she'd installed herself, slightly crooked, and a corkboard covered in papers and Lily's drawings, because Lily left drawings places and Victoria had kept them. He looked at the corkboard. He hadn't noticed it before. A drawing of a fish. That was the bluegill, he was fairly certain. A drawing of the cabin. A drawing of what appeared to be a stick figure family in a variety of improbable situations, one of which seemed to involve a dragon. Victoria followed his gaze. "She leaves them," she said. "I kept them." "Yeah," he said. He looked at the drawings for a moment, then he looked at Victoria. She was sitting across the table with both hands around her mug, and she was looking at him with the particular quality of attention she gave to things she considered worth paying attention to. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I want to say. When this day came, I've been thinking about it for weeks." "What'd you come up with?" he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Nothing prepared," she said. "Every time I tried to prepare something, it sounded wrong, like I was presenting to a board." She set the mug down. "So I'm just going to say the true thing." "Okay," he said. "I'm not the same person who filed those divorce papers 6 months ago," she said. "Not entirely. Some of that is just the relief of it being over, but some of it is the past 6 months of being just myself, like you said, and figuring out what that is." She looked at her hands. "I used to think I knew exactly who I was because I knew exactly what I'd built. And those two things are related, but they're not the same thing." She looked up. "I know that now. I didn't really before." He listened. "And I know," she said, "that what I want isn't the same as needing a place to go. I know that because I built the place myself. I spent 6 months building it, and it's mine, and I don't need anyone to stand in it with me." She paused. "I want you to stand in it with me. That's different." "Yeah," he said. "It is." She looked at him steadily. "Your turn," she said. He nodded. He thought about what was true. He thought about the year before the cabin and the year at the cabin's distance and the 6 months since and what he'd learned about himself in the space of all that careful waiting. He thought about Claire, the way he still did, the way he always would. Not with grief anymore, but with the particular reverence you have for things that shaped you completely. He thought about Lily and what she'd said in January about Victoria carrying something heavy. He thought about the rocking chair at the cabin, fixed and solid now, sitting on the porch through a winter. "I've been alone for a long time," he said. "By choice and by circumstance. And I got good at it. Maybe too good. Good at managing everything myself, at not needing, at keeping the circle small." He paused. Lily is the one who kept me from making that permanent. She needed me to be present in a way I couldn't fake, so I stayed present. And staying present meant I couldn't fully close off. He looked at the table. And then you were there, across the street, making me food I didn't ask for and knowing when to give space and not expecting me to be anything I wasn't. He looked up. I've been falling in the direction of you for 2 years, and I just kept choosing not to fall. Not because I didn't want to, because I didn't think I had the right to want something for myself yet. Victoria was very still. I think I have the right now, he said. She exhaled. It was a very quiet exhale, the kind that means something. Yeah, she said. You do. He reached across the table and she met him halfway, which was fitting. She always met him halfway, had always understood that distance was a shared responsibility. And her hand was warm and real, and she was looking at him with an expression that was not performed happiness, but the more complicated true version of it, the version that has some fear in it, and some history and some genuine uncertainty about the future, and is still unmistakably happiness. They sat like that for a while. No rush, no declaration. Just the Sunday morning, and the kitchen, and the corkboard with Lily's drawings, and 2 people sitting with something real, which is a rarer thing than it sounds. He was home by 9. Lily was up, eating cereal at the table, already in full narrative mode about a dream involving a very important competition between snails that she felt warranted documentation. He sat across from her and listened to the snail competition in its full complexity and made appropriate responses and thought, quietly, that this was the shape of his life, and it was a good shape. After breakfast, he said, "Hey, Bug." "Yeah," Lily said, not looking up from the drawing she'd started of the snail competition. "Would it be okay with you if Victoria and I spent more time together?" He paused. "The 2 of us. Not just us 3. Lily looked up. She looked at him with the direct, measuring gaze she got when she was taking something seriously. He'd seen that look since she was 3 years old. "Like dating?" she said. He hadn't used that word. He considered it. "Yeah," he said. "Something like that." She thought about it. Really thought, in the way she did. Not the performance of thinking, but the actual internal process. Then she said, "Victoria is the kind of person who keeps drawings." He looked at her. "She has a bunch of mine on her corkboard," Lily said. "I left them there sort of to see if she'd keep them." She did. She looked back at her drawing. "I think that matters." He sat with that for a second. "Yeah," he said. "I think so too." "Okay," Lily said. "That's fine." "Just fine?" She looked up at him with an expression that was 9 parts Lily and 1 part something very old. "I think it's good, Daddy," she said. "I just didn't want to sound too excited so you didn't feel weird about it." He looked at his daughter, 8 years old, managing his emotional comfort. "You can be excited," he said. "Okay," she said. "I'm excited." She went back to her drawing. "Can we go to the cabin again this summer? All 3 of us?" "Yeah," he said. "We can do that." "Good," she said. "I want to look for Gerald's kids." He didn't point out the biology of that. He just said, "Sounds like a plan." The months that followed were not uncomplicated. Real things rarely are. Victoria's company went through a restructuring that consumed 2 months of her in a way that was familiar and also different. She was running it from a different center of gravity now, making decisions that were hers without the static of someone else's opinion layered over everything. She made some choices that paid off and one significant one that didn't, and she dealt with the one that didn't with a directness that he found honestly admirable. She called the board, told them what had happened, told them what she was doing to fix it, and fixed it. No performance, just the thing itself. He had his own version of that. The business grew slowly, the right kind of slowly, with a long-form magazine piece about his work running in April that brought in a new category of client, people who cared about the craft and not just the object. He hired help for the first time, a 23-year-old named Marco, who knew woodworking and nothing about how to talk to clients, which Nathan spent 6 months addressing with varying success. He was not a natural boss. He was learning. Charlotte came to visit in May and stayed a week and had her conversation with Victoria, which was, according to Victoria, exactly as long and complicated as she'd predicted, and which ended with both of them crying at Charlotte's kitchen table at midnight, which had not been in the forecast. Nathan met her briefly on the second day, a small, direct woman who looked at him for approximately 10 seconds at the front door and then said to Victoria, "Okay, I see it," which Charlotte apparently felt was sufficient introduction. He did not entirely understand what she saw. He was just Nathan Brooks, a furniture restorer on Cedarwood Lane with a daughter who kept finding reasons the cabin needed another visit, and a life that had more shape to it now than it had had in a long time. The summer did happen. They went back to Lake Harmon in July, all three of them, plus his mother for the first 3 days, which was its own gentle adjustment since his mother had opinions about everything including fishing technique and the correct way to make coffee. Lily was ecstatic and relentless, and found 3 frogs she announced were Gerald's descendants. Victoria proved she had gotten better at marshmallows since October, and remained correct about this. His mother looked at Victoria across the fire pit one evening with an expression Nathan understood, and then looked at Nathan with an expression he understood differently and said nothing, which was its own form of approval from a woman who usually said a great deal. The dock was solid. He'd fixed it right. The rocking chair was on the porch where he'd moved it after the repair, and it held without complaint through a full summer of use, which was exactly what he'd expected from something given enough time and the right attention. And then it was fall again. October. The same amber and red October as the year before, the specific beauty of things changing before they end. They had been back a year from the cabin. Nathan stood in his driveway on a Saturday morning watching the leaves come down from the oak at the edge of the property, the ones Lily had been tracking all week with the devotion of a meteorologist, and felt the year behind him and the year ahead with equal clarity. He had not planned what came next. He'd thought about it, in the way he thought about things, carefully, practically, from multiple angles. But he hadn't planned it, because planned moments had a way of going slightly wrong, and he'd always trusted the unplanned ones more. He just knew when it was right. They went back to the cabin the second weekend in October, which Lily had been lobbying for since August. His mother did not come this time. It was the 3 of them and the lake and the rocking chair on the porch and the dock and the particular quiet of a place that had become, over the course of a year, theirs in a way it hadn't been before. On the last evening, Saturday, after Lily had gone inside, Nathan and Victoria sat on the dock. Same dark water, same owl in the trees across the lake. She had her knees pulled up, and he was beside her, and the moon was different from last year's moon, shaped fuller, sitting lower in the sky. And the dock was solid under them both. "Same dock," she said. "I fixed the board," he said. "I know," she said. "I watched you." He looked at the water. He thought about the year. He thought about all the things you think about when you've made it through something and are sitting on the other side of it. Then he reached into the pocket of his jacket and took out the small box that he'd been carrying there since Friday morning when he'd picked it up from the jeweler in town, which he'd been going back and forth to for 6 weeks, with a description that he'd finally gotten right. He set it on the dock between them. Victoria looked at it. She looked at him. "Nathan," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Is that—" "Yeah," he said. She looked at the box. She looked at the water. She looked at him. There was a long moment where neither of them said anything, and the lake made its sounds, and the owl called once from the trees, and the night was very still. "Lily picked the stone," he said. "She has opinions about these things." Victoria made a sound that was half laugh and half something else. She pressed her fingers to her mouth for a second. "Of course she did," she said. "She said it had to be something that wasn't trying too hard," he said. Her words. "She's right," Victoria said. He opened the box. The ring was simple, a pale green tourmaline, Lily's selection after a rigorous 15-minute deliberation in the jeweler's shop, set in plain yellow gold. Not flashy, not trying too hard, just itself. Victoria looked at it. "I'm not doing this because it's the next logical step," he said, "or because it makes practical sense, or because Lily wants a mother figure, or because you need someone to take care of, or any of the reasons people do this wrong." He paused. "I'm doing it because the past year has been the best year I've had since before everything went wrong. And I know you're the reason for that, and I want more of it." She looked at him. Her eyes were bright in a way she wasn't trying to manage. "You are," she said, "completely the most unromantic romantic person I have ever encountered in my life." "Is that a yes?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Nathan, obviously yes." He put the ring on her finger and she looked at it there, and then she looked at him and leaned into his shoulder, and they sat on the dock for a long time without saying much. The lake was dark and still. Somewhere in the cabin, Lily was almost certainly still awake, reading under the covers with a flashlight, which was a thing she thought he didn't know about and which he'd long ago decided not to address. "We should tell her," Victoria said. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "She's awake right now," Victoria said. "I know," he said. "She's going to scream," Victoria said. "I know that too," he said. Victoria laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind without any management in it, the kind he'd spent a year listening for and never got tired of. She was laughing into the shoulder of his jacket, and the ring was on her finger, and the dock was solid underneath them, and the lake did what lakes do, which is sit there quietly being itself while people figure out their lives on its edges. He thought about all of it, the grief that had shaped him and the patience he'd built out of it, the daughter who saw things clearly, and the neighbor across the street who'd sat on her own front steps running out of reasons to go back inside. The cabin and the rocking chair and the dock board and the way small fixed things added up to a life that held. He didn't think of himself as a man who had won something. He wasn't sure that framing made sense. He thought of himself as a man who had, over a long time and with difficulty and with help, he'd eventually gotten good at accepting, built something that was honest. That held weight. That was his. He put his arm around her. She didn't move away. The lake was quiet. The owl called one more time and then went silent. Above them, through the trees, the stars were doing what Lily said stars do when they're trying. They were very bright.